October 17, 2025. Over the dark waters of the Black Sea, two Storm Shadow cruise missiles launched by the Ukrainian Air Force sliced through the night at 620 miles per hour, flying so low their exhaust touched the waves. Their target, the Podlet K-1 radar station operated by Russian forces, the central eye of the S-400 Triumf air defense network in Crimea. Hours earlier, three Sea Baby unmanned vessels from Ukraine had slipped through the fog carrying Bukovel AD jamming systems to blind Russian sensors and open a corridor for the missiles to strike. In a single operation, engineers, soldiers, and code writers worked together to turn the sea itself into a weapon. The mission's goal was to silence a defense grid worth more than $1 billion for just 6 hours and to prove that intelligence could outmatch firepower. What followed would test every machine, every mind, and every ounce of courage on both sides. Before we reveal how this midnight battle changed the balance of modern warfare, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments, what year were you born? Because your generation is watching history being rewritten in real time. At 2:18 a.m., somewhere off the misty coast of Sevastopol, Black Sea looked calm, too calm. Beneath that glassy silence, Ukraine's audacious operation was about to begin. The target was a Podlet K-1 radar array, the eyes of Russia's S-400 Triumf network, protected by Panzer S-1 guns and guarded by a wall of steel and code worth over $800 million. The mission objective was brutally simple: blind Crimea for 6 hours. They wanted to open a corridor for airstrikes that could decide the fate of the southern front. Ukrainian planners in Kiev studied satellite loops, storm patterns, and fishing routes to find one perfect window, a 14-minute radar gap caused by a daily system recalibration. Three Sea Baby drones disguised as fishing boats drifted from Odessa, their decks hiding racks of explosives and Bukovel AD jamming system. To any Russian operator, they looked harmless, three ghosts moving with the tide. But in war, ghosts can burn cities. If you were in that command room watching those dots creep across the screen, would you see the storm coming? Would you risk everything to make an empire blind for a night? At 2:46 a.m., three Sea Baby unmanned surface vessels slipped through the fog south of Odessa. To radar operators, they were nothing more than fishing boats, slow, harmless, invisible. But beneath their wooden shells were racks of C4 explosives, antennas from the Bukovel AD jamming system, and encrypted transmitters linking them to a control van buried deep under Odessa's port tunnels. Their mission was to open a 6-hour blackout window across the Crimean defense grid, long enough for Storm Shadow missiles to punch through. Every second mattered. Even one stray ping from Russia's Podlet K-1 radar could ruin months of planning. To the north, Ukrainian HIMARS units unleashed a fake strike toward Donetsk, 12 rockets designed not to kill, but to distract. The Russians took the bait, turning their Nebo M radars eastward. In that instant, the sea went blind. As the Sea Babies drifted closer to Sevastopol, their hulls hugged the waves, moving like sharks beneath moonlight, silent, patient, unstoppable. Somewhere inside a Russian command bunker, an operator yawned at his screen, not realizing death was floating toward him at 42 knots. If you were in his place, staring at that calm blue radar, would you sense the ghosts coming? Or would you mistake them for fishermen chasing the dawn? At 3:15 a.m., the calm surface of the Black Sea shattered with a flash of light. Two Storm Shadow cruise missiles tore through the night sky like twin comets flying just 90 feet above the waves. Each missile carried 990 pounds of explosive and a British-made navigation system worth more than a luxury jet. Their destination was the Podlet K-1 radar station on the Tarkankut Peninsula, the brain of Russia's S-400 Triumf network in Crimea. For 6 months, Ukrainian engineers and British advisors had prepared for this exact moment, timing every signal, every route, every heartbeat. But as the missiles entered enemy airspace, Russia's Krasuka 4 electronic warfare system came alive like a metal monster rising from sleep. Its antennas rotated toward the horizon, blasting out 10 billion watts of radio noise. GPS guidance died, satellites went blind, and for a few seconds the storm shadows drifted in silence. Yet inside each missile lived something beyond panic, an infrared seeker that could sense the heat of its prey. When GPS failed, the missiles switched to hunting mode using their own thermal eyes. Every ridge and coastline below was compared against a 3D map stored in memory. They no longer needed orders, they simply knew where to strike. At 3:18 a.m. one missile dropped lower than the radar net, skimming the water so close its exhaust touched the waves. Russian Panzer S-1 launchers fired 2 interceptors, but the missiles veered off target, their sensors jammed by Ukraine's Bukovel AD emitters still humming from the sea. The second Storm Shadow curved inland, racing toward the Podlet K-1 site at 620 miles per hour. Inside the radar bunker, operators shouted over alarms as red lights pulsed across their consoles. The system screamed, "Impact imminent," but by the time the order reached the commander's lips, it was already over. At 3:19 a.m., the first Storm Shadow struck the Podlet antenna array with brutal precision. The blast ripped through reinforced steel, tearing cables as thick as a man's arm. The rotating dish that once scanned the sky was thrown 200 feet into the air before collapsing in molten fragments. The explosion didn't just destroy metal, it blinded the entire S-400 network across western Crimea. For the first time in 2 years, the Russian defense grid went silent. Command links to Sevastopol faded one by one. The Empire's eyes had been torn out in 5 seconds. In Kyiv, analysts stared at satellite feeds as the radar line turned flat. One whispered, "They did it." Fishermen miles away saw a fireball brighter than the moon. In Moscow, a general demanded answers that no one dared to give. Precision had done what artillery never could. Intelligence had outmatched brute strength. Tell me, when a $2 million missile can cripple a $1 billion defense, is that brilliance or insanity? And if machines now decide their own targets, who do you think learns faster, the engineer or the algorithm? At 3:25 a.m., the night over Crimea was no longer quiet. Flames still licked the shattered remains of the Podlet K-1 radar. Its metal ribs glowed red like the bones of a dying beast. Yet from those ashes, Russia's retaliation began. The S-400 Triumf system at Tarkhan snapped to life. 448 N6E2 missiles roared off their launch rails, each one longer than a bus and costing over $2 million. Their exhaust lit up the coastline like a second sunrise. From Sevastopol to Yevpatoria, operators scrambled to regain control of the defense grid. Commanders shouted coordinates that no longer existed. Without the Podlet radar, their eyes were gone, and the S-400 batteries were shooting blind. Still, they fired into the darkness, hoping to hit anything that moved. One missile struck the sea, another exploded mid-air. The third found something small and fast, a Sea Baby unmanned vessel slicing through the surf at 42 knots. The impact created a column of water taller than a building. But before that drone vanished, it transmitted every byte of live data back to Odessa. Its sacrifice completed the loop. At 3:33 a.m., something stranger happened. The Krasuka-4 electronic warfare trucks deployed near Tarkhan began to glitch. Operators inside heard static screaming through their headsets as if the machines were being haunted by their own signal. On their radar screens, hundreds of phantom targets appeared, blinking and vanishing like ghosts. The cause was Ukraine's counter-jamming unit known as Nota, an experimental system designed to reflect and distort the enemy's own radio waves. The Russians were staring at their own noise. One officer compared it to fighting in a hall of mirrors. Every reflection looked like the enemy. Every shadow looked like an incoming missile. The more the system tried to jam, the more confusion it created. Krasuka-4 had turned against its masters. At 3:40 a.m., a Spetsnaz rapid response team of 20 men was deployed by helicopter to secure the wreckage of the Podlet site. They landed in what looked like a lunar crater. Smoke thick as tar choked the air. Steel beams twisted like vines. The ground was so hot that their boots left molten footprints. Instruments that once powered the radar were fused into a single black mass. Nothing was left to recover, only silence and ash. From orbit, American NRO satellites captured the aftermath in chilling detail, a 30-meter crater still glowing from residual heat. Analysts later calculated that the energy released in the blast was equivalent to 5,500 pounds of TNT. It was not an explosion, it was an erasure. By 3:45 a.m. Russian High Command ordered a full communication blackout across western Crimea. Panic spread faster than smoke. Without radar guidance, the S-400 batteries shut down to conserve missiles. Panzer S-1 units switched to manual mode, scanning the sky with thermal cameras like men trying to catch bullets with their eyes. At 3:50 a.m., the last Sea Baby drone still alive transmitted a single encrypted signal, a pulse lasting only 2 seconds. That pulse triggered the second phase of the operation, a swarm of decoy UAVs launched from the coast of Mykolaiv. To the disoriented Russian defenses, it looked like a new attack wave. Dozens of missiles streaked upward, chasing shadows. Each interceptor cost millions. Each target cost less than a motorcycle. In under 10 minutes, Russia had spent the equivalent of $15 million shooting at nothing. Sevastopol's harbor sirens wailed. Soldiers ran through the streets in confusion. Civilians filmed the tracers from their balconies, thinking they were watching a meteor shower. They didn't know they were witnessing the moment their own defense network collapsed under the weight of its panic. When dawn came, only smoke remained. The Iron Tower had struck back, but the blow had landed on itself. War is strange that way. Sometimes the sharper your sword, the deeper you cut your own hand. If you were sitting in that bunker hearing your own radar scream at ghosts, would you still believe technology makes you safe? Or would you finally understand that in modern war, confusion is the most powerful weapon of all? At 6 a.m., the first light of dawn crawled over Crimea, revealing a coastline still breathing smoke. The Podlet. K1 radar was gone, reduced to a black scar on the earth. What had been the sharpest eye of Russia's S-400 Triumf network was now a melted skeleton worth less than scrap metal. For 6 hours, the entire western grid of Crimea remained blind. In those 6 hours, Ukrainian Air Force squadrons launched 18 precision strikes using Storm Shadow and SCALPEG missiles. Their targets were ammunition depots in Sevastopol, fuel bunkers in Dzhankoi, and a command relay node near Belbek Air Base. Every missile reached its mark. By sunrise, 3 Panzer S-1 systems were destroyed and 2 radar trucks still burned in their craters. Russian communications went dark across an area larger than Delaware. Satellite photos taken by the American NRO showed the full cost, a 30-meter crater at Tarkhankut, a chain of fires along the coast, and the Black Sea Fleet pulling its ships out of port to escape what it could not see. For the first time in the war, Sevastopol's harbor fell silent. In Kiev, commanders called it Operation Glass Dagger. It cost Ukraine less than $15 million to cripple over $1 billion in Russian defenses. It proved that in modern warfare, information is armor and deception is ammunition. Every empire believes its walls will stand forever until one small hand finds the light switch. So let me ask you this. When silence can defeat firepower, who really holds the future of war? The one with the biggest missile or the one who knows exactly when to turn off the lights? Wars are no longer fought only with tanks and soldiers. They are fought with code, with silence, and with ideas. What happened that night over Crimea was more than a military strike. It was a message written in fire across the Black Sea, a reminder that intelligence and creativity can outweigh brute power. Ukraine turned limited tools into precision weapons. They proved that the mind is still the most dangerous weapon on Earth. Think about it, a radar worth hundreds of millions erased by a missile guided by its own memory. A billion-dollar defense network blinded not by force, but by misdirection. That is not just technology, that is strategy and courage combined. It shows us that the future of conflict belongs to those who can outthink, not outspend. For us watching from a distance, this story is not just about war, it is about perspective. Every challenge in life, every system that seems unbeatable, has a weakness waiting for the right idea to find it. Power without wisdom collapses. But creativity, even in the smallest hands, can change history. So as the smoke clears over the Black Sea, ask yourself, what would you have done in their place? Would you have dared to face an empire with only knowledge and nerve? If you believe that courage and intelligence still matter in this world, make sure to subscribe to the channel and join us for the next story. And before you go, tell me one thing in the comments. What year were you born? I want to know which generation is listening to these lessons from the front lines of history.